Hi, I'm Lisa Saunders. Welcome to PAC-B TV out of Baldwinsville, New York. And I have a former New Yorker here, Dr. Lee McDowell, a very special author I've had on before. And go ahead and introduce yourself and the book we're going to talk about and where you're from.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's a real pleasure to be back here again. Well, just background. I was raised in upstate New York on a livestock farm. Got major college degrees at University of Georgia and Washington State University. But in between degrees, my wife Lorraine and I went to Bolivia for the Peace Corps for 2 years. And then basically in 1971, joined the faculty of the University of Florida in the nutrition area, in teaching and research. And as far as research, I have 1,500 scientific articles, and 2 societies have given me awards in teaching and research. I've taken over 200 international trips where I've given talks and set up experiments and given talks in actually all 6 continents, shall we say, and 18 books, mostly nutrition. But the last 3 books are history books dealing with presidents, and of course our present book today is also a history book, U.S. wars and disease. Well. Diseases have devastated mankind before written records, and more people have died and have been crippled by disease than ever have been by all wars put together. And so that's an important concept. And actually, it's civilization increased disease intensity because people were now together more. For instance, you're in an army camp and you eat together, you sleep together, you march together, war together, and so this helps spread the diseases. Well, okay, the particular book has 2 major features. One is we're going to go over the 13 major U.S. wars, and also diseases that affected them. So in the wars, we're going to give, the major battles and the cause and the result and chronological listing of events and this sort of thing. Then the disease part, will include actually major innovations in medicine as we went along. Now, chapter 1 basically is going to be world diseases, and this is going from pandemics and plagues from China 3000 BC up to COVID-19. It's getting current. The second chapter deals with how European diseases killed so many Native Americans, and then 3 through 14 are the 13 individual battles. And the results. Well, the main point of this book is 8 of these 13 wars, infectious disease killed many more than did enemy action. Okay, so let's in other words, what diseases are we talking about? Well, smallpox, malaria, typhoid, typhus, diarrhea, dysentery, yellow fever, cholera, diphtheria, and measles. So those are the major diseases. So anyway, let's.
Well, I have to tell you, the picture you had of smallpox, I was shocked. Really, I guess I've never seen a picture of smallpox. And you use a picture of somebody with smallpox next to a child with smallpox next to a child without smallpox, who I'm worried about was about to get smallpox because it's so contagious. But anyway, what a horrible, horrible disease. Now I can picture.
It is. And so many died from smallpox, and you can blame this on the Europeans before another, even starting back with Columbus.
Yeah, it looks so much worse than chicken pox. You know what I mean? I don't know. Oh
yeah, right.
Anyway, and your other pictures were very interesting. So thanks for including those. And I'm glad you didn't show us somebody with diarrhea. I could have pictured that without you showing a picture. And of
Yeah,
course, I
yeah,
like the
well,
pic.
those are pictures for private collections. So,
All right,
okay.
go ahead.
Well, let's start with King Philip's War. Well, in other words, you, Lisa, know a whole lot more about King Philip's War than I do, uh, since you've written 2 books. But I want to give some of the background. In other words, the first Thanksgiving was 1621. This was between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag Indians. Okay, but 4 years earlier, there was a shipwreck by the French at Cape Cod. Well, the Wampanoag Indians went through, killed everybody on the ship except for 4 or 5, and then they took the 4 or 5 back to their villages, and that was the bad news. Now smallpox, viral hepatitis, and other diseases. And it's estimated actually 90% of the Wampanoag Indians died. So you can see why they wanted to have a relationship with the Pilgrims, because they were afraid of their mortal enemy, which the diseases had not hit yet. And so, but anyway, this went for 55 years. All was well between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. But then the Indians were dissatisfied. They were not treated well. They probably were not. And so then we have the War of 14 months. Well, okay. And as I said before, it's disease that was killing, well, there were many deaths, but there was disease that was killing many. But it was killing more of the Indians than it was the Pilgrims, just because European diseases were very devastating. Okay, let's go to the French and Indian War. Okay, just illustrating this disease aspect. The area, what is now Florida, it was estimated there were 900,000 Native Americans. Well, that was in 1520, and by 1700 there were only 2,000. So the massive death loss, if you do that. Okay, French and Indian War. This was actually the example of the first biological warfare. In other words, Indians that had died from smallpox, the British would take blankets that they use, and they pass these blankets on to their enemy Indians. And so,
On purpose?
yeah, you bet, on purpose. And so a lot of death loss of the enemy Indians in that regard. Okay, so let's move on. Revolutionary War. Okay, for every soldier killed in the Revolutionary War, 10 died from infectious disease. And George Washington had a terrible problem with smallpox. 1/3 of his men had smallpox, and he was afraid he was going to be attacked if the enemy had known this. Well, so he is the first one to come up with an immunization vaccine type of arrangement, where anyway you would slice the arm, boom, and then you put blood from somebody who had smallpox in there, and now this person would get smallpox, hopefully a mild form.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and that would, some didn't survive that, but most did. Okay, let's okay, another. During the Revolutionary War, what do you suppose the main medical treatment was? Well, it was bleeding. Whether you had a sprained ankle or a wound, bleed them. In fact, this affected George Washington after his 2 terms. He had some viral infection, and 2 doctors stayed at his house for a while. And how did they treat him? They kept bleeding him. And their conversation went something like this. Well, the last time we bled him, it didn't seem to do that much good. Well, let's bleed him one more time before we leave. And they did. And he died. Now, I may be wrong, but in my opinion, George Washington would be alive today if they had not bled him that second time.
You're right.
Yeah, right. Maybe anyway. Okay, then the War of 1812, the Mexican War, the Spanish-American War, all the same thing. Infectious disease were the big killers. In fact, the worst was the Mexican War. 88% of deaths of Americans was from infectious disease. Okay, now let's move to Civil War. Okay, well, between 620 and 675,000 troops died because of this. And that's one battle, the Battle of Shiloh. Many deaths. Well, and this is just a 2-day battle. In this 2-day battle, there were more deaths than total from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Mexican War. But then it gets worse. How about a 3-day battle? Gettysburg, 12 times as many deaths as was at Shiloh. So well, what was the problem? Well, in other words, the doctors had no idea of the cause of disease. That's the problem. And in fact, look, they placed latrines upriver, and the drinking water was downriver. So you'd get feces or doo-doo in your water. And then a lot of the troops didn't use the latrines. They used bushes and trees for their business, and flies would go to that. And then the flies would go to the food. So,
Oh gosh.
so now we're getting a lot of diarrhea, dysentery, and typhoid. Those are the two main diseases from this lack of
From
sanitation.
contaminated
then-
water is typhus?
Yeah, and then they knew
Okay.
nothing about insects. Of course, yellow fever, yellow fever and malaria, mosquitoes, and then typhus. This was lice and ticks and some others. So these were the, see, they didn't understand. So the Civil War, they didn't understand, and they didn't have enough doctors, and they only trained for 2 years. And U.S. medicine was way behind Europe. In other words, Harvard University didn't have a single stethoscope or microscope.
Wow.
Whereas
Now,
many
didn't I read in your
Europeans did.
book that which war was that? They didn't even sterilize the equipment before they'd amputate one leg, then go on to amputate another
that was
one?
problem. In other words, their main operation was amputation. Do you think that they cleaned their instruments between customers? And do you suppose they washed their hands afterwards? And actually, just the hygiene. They did not bathe. The soldiers did not bathe, so that the camps were sort of smelly, shall we say. In fact, it said that, okay, they're off on a march, they come back from the march, but you can actually smell them before you see them. So that was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay, World War I. Okay, different situation. Now they understand the germ theory, viruses are recognized, and immunization that to some degree for typhoid fever and tetanus, but that was all. And better sanitation, and some better insect control. But even so, there were more deaths from infectious disease during World War I. The question, why? 3 words: 1918 Spanish flu. Spanish flu killed 43,000 soldiers and sailors. World War I. And in fact, this pandemic had killed 50 million people worldwide. So, okay, World War II. Okay, we're talking about something completely different. Now they have a lot of vaccines for some of the major diseases. Now they have antibiotics, penicillin, sulfa drugs, and DDT to control the insects, mosquitoes, and this sort of thing. And so things were much better. So, yeah.
I think you included a picture of being sprayed for lice. I can't remember if that was, I think that was World War I, that picture. They had to spray the whole person for lice. Like,
Yeah, the lice. Well,
that can't be too good for you to have this
No.
chemical sprayed all over you.
No, that's right. Of course, particularly in the hair, so that's going to get in the face and the whole sort of thing, So, yeah. So anyway, that's what. Okay. Now let me just mention the Korean War. Jump to that. It was pretty cold there sometimes. In fact, one battle, the U.S. troops were pinned down, and they couldn't move, and it was 50 below 0 Fahrenheit. And wind chill, they say, well, probably closer to 100. And I've been in minus 40, and it's cold. But anyway, so what happens? 5,000 cases of frostbite. In other words, losing their toes, losing their fingers, and worst of all, gangrene and this sort of thing. So that was certainly a different situation. And okay, well, I guess I'm about through. Do I have more time or?
You have a few more minutes, but I was shocked when I read in your book about negative 50 degrees in Korea. I don't know why I didn't realize it got that cold there.
No. Like I say, I've been when it's 40 degrees when worked in Washington State, and that was cold. It's sort of like you've been hit with a hammer when you go outside.
Yeah. You have a couple more minutes in case you want to jump ahead, because the good news is, as terrible as war is, it sounds like they've made so many advances that there aren't as many diseases, people dying from disease, soldiers.
Yes, and having wars is a stimulus to medical research.
Oh,
And
is
see,
it?
they learn a lot about what they can do, and they well, these vaccines, to come up with vaccines. Smallpox is not a problem anymore. Typhoid's not a problem anymore. Yellow fever is not a problem. You know, tremendous advances, and wars help that out. And see, it was back in the late 1800s. Koch, just working with anthrax, discovered he could transfer blood from an animal with anthrax to one without and give that animal that. So that means there were microorganisms that were not good in that situation. And then Louis Pasteur, he was working with anthrax also. He developed a type of vaccine to resist that to a certain degree, but that was the late 1800s. But you know, it took a while, you know, for this to work. I mean, and of course, World War II would have had many more deaths to military activity had it not been for the Spanish flu, 1918. That was a difference maker by all means, you know. So and then well, in other words, they're improving in blood transfusions now they had now. And they were much better in getting people off the battlefield. In some of these early wars, somebody might be shot, but they might stay there 4 hours before anybody bothers to pick them up.
Oh
To treat
yeah,
them.
even up to a week. You know, when you read these memoirs and hear about it, it's terrible. I mean, of
Yeah.
course, it's all terrible. And you had a sad statistic that now soldiers aren't dying from diseases, suicide. If they're not killed in battle or from wounds, you said suicide is the highest cause of death. Is that
Yeah.
right?
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So mental health,
Well,
obviously.
if I were in the temperature of minus 50 degrees, I would certainly consider suicide.
Yeah. Just, you talked about a little bit about what was that called? The Gulf War syndrome, right? Something like that.
Oh,
What?
yeah, right.
Yeah, as a disease, people were that it was kind of vague though, right? Do they?
Well, it is, and a lot of diseases were attributed to that really weren't, and so it was hard to tell how strong that was, but it was a factor. And of course, in Vietnam, they were defoliating the forages, and that ended up in a lot of bad toxicities and
Oh
people going
yeah.
back after the war. So
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Well, yeah, it was a fascinating look at the wars in addition to the diseases, because I appreciate that you summarized each war at the end with, a timeline just to help me get things straight, certain battles and major events. So thank you very much. It's an excellent book. We can't give prices or anything like that, but where could somebody get a book
Oh,
and how is it available?
right. This is sort of the typical Barnes and Nobles and Amazon and elsewhere. I'm not really sure
Okay, so
where
you
all.
told so people can go online and do a search on U.S. War and Diseases by Dr. Lee McDowell, and they should be able to find your book.
Yeah, they should. They should.
Okay, yeah, and you have a couple. You have what are your other titles on the when you're in your
Well,
history
the one
books? What are your other
that
titles?
interviewed me last time was presidents as military officers. See, the
Mhm.
majority of presidents were in the military prior to the presidency.
Right.
And then there are other books that just more on the presidency and what they did and the international intrigue and all of that. So and humor.
Right, because you have a lot of humor in
A
there, and
lot of humor in those previous books. Yes.
and I did laugh out.
This one is more serious. This book.
Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't as much funny stuff in there. But no, but it was very interesting. I learned a lot and it makes me appreciate modern science. That's for sure.
Well,
So
I appreciate your interviewing and appreciate anybody that listens to this. So.
and so people can how can they reach you? Do you have an email address if people want to contact you directly? Because you give talks on cruise ships and wherever people may want
Yeah.
you, possibly, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, email is, let's see, LEER period. Let's see. I don't remember my own email very well. At
Lee R. McDowell.
McDowell after. Okay. Dot McDowell at
Gmail. Gmail.
At Gmail.
Okay. All right.
Email.
And if worst case scenarios, people can't find you, they could always email me and I can put them in touch with you. My email is lisasaunders42@gmail.com. And I will put them in touch because you're a wonderful speaker. I know you have everyone laughing and enjoying themselves. And I've enjoyed getting your books over the many years. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.